Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Sharon D. Johnson. I am back with my fabulous sister, the master of all she surveys, master teacher, assistant principal, literacy coach. What else have you done all throughout? Just everything, right? Child wrangler.
Social worker. Guidance counselor. Whatever's necessary.
So we are here. It is actually Holy Saturday, the day before Easter. This is going to be posted on Easter Sunday, and you will find out why in 2 seconds when I tell you what we are going to be talking about. So we are here to jailbreak the Black University, jailbreak the Black classroom. Last year, you might have seen my post where my sister and I were talking about Monster and what's the other one we did? For Colored Girls.
For Colored Girls,
so
right.
We are talking about Black adaptations for screen. So today we are talking about the short story by Professor John Henrik Clarke, The Boy Who Painted Christ Black. And I vaguely remember that movie. I vaguely remember seeing it, but it didn't register. And so what made it register was, again, last year when we were on lockdown, a scholar named Anthony Browder, who's in DC, did a series of webinars on the Africans' roots of Christianity.
Okay.
And so that, that was right up my alley because I had given a number of talks on, the Black roots of Catholicism. And he mentioned the story. And I was like, what? Dr. Clarke wrote a short story? And so I found, as you know, I found the short story, whatever. And you can tell that a teacher prepared that document because at the end there's all the questions. I was like,
the questions were really good too.
It's like, oh,
I'm going to use
think
this.
about it.
Right.
So
those
thank
are
you,
the kinds of questions that the teachers don't ask.
That's right.
So I'm definitely using
it. So thank you, Tony Browder, for even mentioning the story and bringing it up. So read the story, watched the film, and then read some of those extra articles.
Extra resources.
So the point that I want to sort of emphasize before we start is, there's a lot of resistance to whether, ancient Egyptians were Black and, this, that, and the other. And so this idea of the historical Jesus and, what color or what race or ethnicity he was. Oh, we don't know. If you know what dinosaurs look like.
Of course.
You know what Jesus looked like. So come on. I mean, really? So so that's why this story just resonates. And with it being tomorrow being Easter Sunday, who we envision as we rise to new life is real important, right? And so this is like a perfect time to do it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about
I'm ready to jump right in.
The story, the movie, everything.
So what you're saying with regard to the timing of such a conversation, resistance was my first takeaway. Looking at the film, reading the story, and the additional resources, it was an ongoing theme. In addition to racism and power, ironically, so I first heard about this story when I was watching Good Times, to be honest. So I was a child, and I remember J.J. Evans painted Black Jesus, and the whole household was like, "Who's that? It looks like Ned the Wino or whoever." And Florida was so upset, like, "How dare you be this blasphemous?" And the fear of admitting to truth is an overwhelming problem, whether we're talking about this or anything else in the world.
Right.
And after a year-long struggle in a pandemic, being able to see representation of yourself is very healing. Knowing this idea of resurrection and repurpose, restarting, re-energizing, and rejoicing on, and there are some who cannot physically be here to rejoice with us, but they most certainly are. They're resurrected.
Right.
So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by the content of the actual story and the film. I think they were very close. The adaptation was very close. I loved Wesley Snipes as the principal. I think the sense of doubt was poignant in the very beginning. Like, who allowed you to do that? And it's just like, wow, this young man, in thinking about Christ and what Christ represents, just decided that, well, he must look like people who are kind and loving and forgiving. And he's never seen any white people be that way. So He's like, oh, Jesus must be Black.
Right.
And that kind of synthesis is incredible to me. And it's just like, this is a little boy,
right,
who has clearly no fear or reservation. And I even thought about that, like, where did he get that from? How did he learn to be that way?
Right. Well, it's interesting. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Look, it's interesting because I think in the story he just mentions an uncle who works with the YWCA or YMCA or whatever, and teaches African history, whatever. Yes. But in the movie they tweaked it where he says his uncle Skeeter is a Garveyite, and so Marcus Garvey started the Universal Negro Association in 1914. And there was a big following in Chicago, but according to John Henrik Clarke, the biggest and most successful, if you will, group of UNIA Black folk was in Harlem. The filmmakers, in adapting it, infused the adaptation with more of Dr. Clarke's history in mentioning that, in giving this boy a fuller history about where he might have, got some of that, that courage to paint Black. So I liked that aspect of bringing more Dr. Clarke into the adaptation.
And that's so audacious for a child.
Right, that's right.
Especially when children are taught to think otherwise.
Right.
We usually don't step out on that limb. So that was profound. I liked the idea that, his uncle is teaching.
Right.
That's right. I'm teaching something other than the norm or what is acceptable.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's what we have to do. And it's not about battling other races or ideologies. It's about being able to identify and relate. It's about religion and spirituality being relevant to you. I think that the immorality of the world is about a lack of relationship and relevance and seeing yourself as righteous.
Right.
When you don't see yourself as righteous, how do you behave?
Right.
Something other than that.
Right. You mentioned like the child being kind of infused with this audacity. So let me just, since we just dove right in, basically the Boy Who Painted Christ Black is a short story, as I said, by Professor John Henrik Clarke, esteemed first of all, esteemed ancestor, but esteemed scholar, historian, writer, proponent of Pan-Africanism, which follows in Marcus Garvey's footsteps, actually. And Dr. Clarke, I think, was born in 1915. So his formative years were in the heart of Garveyism. You know, Marcus Garvey started UNIA in 1914, 15. You know, this is how, you know, John Henrik Clarke grew up. It's about a young boy who he and his classmates are preparing for their teacher's birthday. And so he decides, he's very talented and smart. And so he decides he's going to paint his teacher a painting for her birthday.
Right.
And he decides to paint a Black Christ. And the teacher is profoundly moved by looking at it and asks him, you know, what made you paint this? And he gives the story about his uncle and the things he's learned from his uncle and how it must be true because he didn't see any white people being kind like Jesus, so Jesus must be Black. The principal is a little less receptive. And for various, and they heighten it in the adaptation. So in the short story, the white supervisor over the schools in Georgia, they're in Georgia, the film set them in 1948. So this is before Brown versus Board of Ed. But it's when schools were segregated. But as Zora Neale Hurston said, the Black schools in the South were just fine.
I don't want to make this about school. Only.
But anyway, started. So Mr. Duval, the principal of the school, is Black. The supervisor is white. And so the principal is being pressured by the supervisor. Yes. And so there's a pride festival. In the film, it's a pride festival. Right. In the short story, it's, you know, the commencement celebration. But there's an opportunity to showcase some students' work. And so the dilemma is, should we showcase this Black Christ? Right. And the principal is pressured on one side by the boy's teacher. Right. This is great. You said you want the best, you know, you want to see the best in these children. Here he is with this great people. And pressured by the white supervisor of superintendent of schools who has to look after white schools and Black schools. Black schools, right. And so the dilemma of that is heightened in the film through dialogue and through, you know, Duval, played by Wesley Snipes. He's offered a promotion. So the promotion's on the line. They also give him a wife in the film, played by Jasmine Guy. So you have these two women, the teacher, who is Vanessa Bell Calloway, his wife, who is Jasmine Guy. The wife wants him to play it safe. They have a nice home. She says, remember when we were struggling? Right. So the issue of colorism is introduced in the film, but it's not attacked, which I thought, I picked that up right away. Yeah, very right. And I think it should have been addressed. Don't just make Jasmine the bad guy because she's light skinned.
She wants to play it safe. Right? There's a reason why she wants to play it safe. It's not just because I want a nice car and home. Right. So, and I think not giving her at least just making her the antagonist and not supporting her husband. And I just want to interject for a second. The other antagonizing factor is it seems as though in the film, his career or his former career or hobby as a musician is being, you know, quelled by to, you know, have a career,
be responsible,
work and be responsible. Yes. And so this idea that we Black people are constantly in that dilemma. Right. You know, this dichotomy. Can I be who I really want to be or do what I really want to do? Or do I have to, you know, do this?
Play the game. That's right. Fit into the prescribed, the acceptable, the American
When I don't play the game, I'm a bad guy. I'm criticized. I'm blacklisted. You know, all of these things. I can't have a life.
Right. So they gave him that dimension. They could have given his wife, and it doesn't take a lot, just something to show why she's resistant.
Right.
You know, why she's like, no plate safe, besides just being materialistic. We used to be poor and now we have this nice house.
Exactly.
Right.
That made it seem a little shallow.
Right.
And like she didn't really care about supporting her husband.
Right.
Or supporting our people. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And of course, the light-skinned person is the turncoat.
That's right. That's right. So I thought that was that could have been addressed a little more, but I like that I'm sorry?
Like what she did for a living.
Right, right.
You know, you saw her
anything.
Home, right. But there was really no background or, you know, dialogue about what she does.
Right.
Or
to give that
correct.
Right. To give that side of our dilemma.
Right.
Context.
Right. Validity.
Instead of just, you know,
was like there a struggle that she went through. Or
that's
her parents or whatever, or I know how this movie ends, so
that's right.
Girl, you have to do what you have to do.
That's right. But I liked that, you know, of course, to give it more drama, he's offered a promotion.
Yes.
Whereas in the short story, he's not. But so in the end, he picks, in the film, in the end, he does submit. People think that he doesn't, but in the end, he does include the young man's painting of Black Christ. He actually picks two in the film. One is called The Reunion, and then he pulls it back, and then the second one is the Black Christ film. So that the Reunion, so that you mentioned him having this extra character aspect in the film of, you know, being a you know, musician, you know, sort of a denying himself his artistic side. So the film was part of a 3-part, like a triptych. It was called The American Dream. The series was called The American Dream, and the 3 films were The Reunion, and the story was written by Maya Angelou. The Boy Who Painted Christ Black, written by John Henrik Clarke, short story. And then the third one was what is it called? The Long Black Door.
Okay.
Written by Richard Wright, and it was about a jazz musician. Okay. So I'm thinking that by giving one of the winning paintings the title The Reunion, and then giving Wesley's character, Professor Duval, this musician background, it's tying it to those other 2 films.
That makes sense.
But also in choosing both paintings, what I liked was The Reunion, and he explains, you know, at the assembly that, you know, we're all one. Again, that ties in Dr. Clarke and his Garveyism with Black people around the world must be united. He was interested in obviously Pan-Africanism, and this is what Dr. Clarke, you know, Pan-Africanism. We are connected to our brothers and sisters in Africa and throughout the diaspora.
Right. Which is very underplayed.
And something that this whole talk of reparations, there is a certain group that doesn't want anyone else from the diaspora to be reparated. Just the people who are descendants of the enslaved. Well, people from Brazil are descendants of the enslaved too.
Absolutely.
People in Jamaica and Haiti, they're right. Yeah. So this idea, it must be Pan-African. So what I liked about the film was that it gave its nod to that through The Reunion. And then it just doubled down on this idea of we must have a different perception of ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that is what this painting represents. Right. So I did like the way they opened that up and really put more of Dr. Clarke. Right. And his teachings. Right. In the film through Wesley Snipes, which is correct. And that was a good turn for him because he's in this dilemma. Right. And in the end, he's healing his own little boy. He's walking off with the little boy. You know?
Correct.
So
correct. You know, how do I maintain the integrity that I need to maintain to sleep well at night?
Right. Right.
And I'm the
Right.
principal. I have
Right.
control of what children learn here.
Right.
And, you know, we have these discussions at work all the time. I'm like, why are we asking for permission?
Right.
This is our school. We need
Right.
to dictate what children
What
learn.
they learn. That's right.
So,
And am I doing my job
if I'm not,
if I don't? Right.
No.
That little boy's response was more important than the superintendent, than the wife. That it's like, this is who I'm responsible for.
Right.
And to look at that boy's face, because I'm saying your work isn't good enough. Can't do that. So he that was what his decision, you know.
There was a line in the short story where the superintendent, you know, made a comment about, like, you know, can't have these niggers getting smart, or, you know, whatever, which again is another little inkling. And it's like, oh, so you know it too, huh, superintendent? You know the truth too. And that's, you know, that's the kind of stuff that just incites me, right?
Right.
Because
right.
other people know they know the truth,
Right.
but they're ready to condemn this little boy and the entire school population.
That's right.
Over misrepresentation. And it's just
That's
like,
right.
And as I want to go back to Pan-Africanism, and it's synonymous with, or it's being synonymous with Pangea. And we know for a fact how many millions of years old, you know, Lucy is. And you mean to tell me
that's right.
You can't dig up any information
that's right. That's
like
right.
that region of the world and what the region looked like then.
Not now.
That's another thing that's just, it's not taught in school.
That's right.
And this is not about having a superiority complex.
Right.
This is because that's just arrogance.
Right.
Especially if you don't have all the information.
Right.
But it's about wholeness.
Right.
You know, it is, again, it's about relevance and connection and acceptance of your legacy.
Right.
And I know for a fact our children would behave much differently if we engaged them like this on a regular basis.
Right.
And intentionally, you know, like, okay, so let's develop the curriculum that we want to see students engage in. You know what I mean? It's like a fact-based discussion of these particular topics. And children need to know that what the world looks like today is not what it looked like in 1914,
right,
1814,
right,
or BC.
Right.
You know,
right.
I do want to say that the teacher in the short story and the teacher in the film, Vanessa Bell Calloway, you know, just displayed a little bit more assertiveness in the film than in the story, because it was almost as if the teacher in the story was ready to
yes, she was a little timid at first, right?
Correct. Yes. So I like the fact that in the film, you know, she initially, yes, was like, oh, and then like not even a minute passes and she's like, you know what?
We're gonna go into the we're gonna get into the
yeah. And she was putting pressure on the principal.
That's
and she was like, all right, you know, like
that's right.
Yeah, we'll put it in there, you know. So and poor principal, you know,
that's right.
So he's got it from her, the wife. It's just like,
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and having to make that choice, like, am I going to be persuaded by potential finances and status, or do I reach back?
Right.
Do I reach back and ensure that this young man, excuse me, and all the other students watching, understand what's going on here?
Right.
Do they understand the sacrifice that's being made? Do they understand the impact of this decision?
Right.
Because if they don't understand it now, they will soon.
Right.
And that's, I think, in a lot that I do in school, that's what allows me to be a little rebellious and like, no, we're not doing that.
We're not doing that.
Or, yeah, like, you know, I know what the history book says or whatever, but, you know, we need to also address this, you know,
Right.
because even if a sixth grader, you know, doesn't quite have that audacity or that self-worth, they will. They
Right.
will. The impact of what we do today may be seen in the next generation, for all we know.
Right.
But at least you're making the choice to do it. And that's what I could appreciate in the short story, the film, that the choice was made to say, you know what?
Right.
No, we're not
That's,
just gonna cave or conform.
that's right.
Yeah, we're gonna do what's right here.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. No, yeah, I agree. And so it was, like I said, it was before, you know, Brown versus Board of Ed was coming in 1954. And so that whole, it was the sweet spot. What I liked was that the school was a well-appointed
Yes.
Negro school, because the perception is, you know, that they were inadequate in some way.
Yes.
And it's like, no, they were not.
Right.
And again, this was Zora Neale Hurston's, this is why she wrote her editorial, you know, courts can't make races mix. And she felt that that desegregating the schools was a mistake, that there were plenty of qualified,
right,
as the movie showed, there was plenty of qualified teachers, principals, supervisors,
Absolutely.
educated people who
Absolutely.
knew what they were doing and were giving students
right,
a solid education. It's not better just because you get to sit next to a white student, right?
Right.
Matter of fact, it's worse because now there's microaggressions, people who don't want it, people who presume you're just there because you're Black,
we had
and that you can't keep up. Right. So, but again, Zora Neale Hurston was sliced up for having that position, right? The NAACP, no disrespect against the NAACP, but the NAACP trashed Zora Neale Hurston for having that position. Just as in Chicago, the Garveyite movement, they wanted to put a, I think it was, I want to say it's mayor.
Okay.
At the time, I'm blanking on the year, but they wanted to put one of their candidates, not that they wanted to be involved in politics, because the idea was the American dream is not what we're going for. We're going for African unity and to build up, you know, the African diaspora, and the American dream is a lie. But since this person had that aspiration, they wanted to put their candidate there. The NAACP quashed that and put a more accommodating Black candidate. I'm blanking on the year. If I'll put the information in the description box when this gets posted to Zoom. But yeah, so, you know, this whole idea that we are somehow deficient or inadequate, to me, it was given even more richness in the film.
Right.
By all these other little things that, you know, the teachers were capable, that the school was well appointed. Yes, brick with running water, you know. No, I mean, because the perception is that, and yes, there are some severely impoverished, there's still severely impoverished, you know, neighborhoods and school districts. But the idea that segregation was necessary for us to get the best was a fallacy. And even Martin Luther King had to say that toward the end of his life.
Right.
We're trying to integrate into a burning house. Right.
Right.
Wesley Snipes, you know, he's such a good actor.
He is.
In anything. I'm just thinking New Jack City.
Right.
I mean, and I know, that's not a good example of, there are drug deals in the world, and he played a damn good, right? Just like Denzel Washington played a damn good crooked cop. right?
Yeah.
It's acting, as
Right.
my girl Dr. Jolie Prophet says, it's acting, right? So yeah, but so him playing the principal.
Yeah.
And you mentioned color, like, let's get a deep, rich chocolate man to play this, no ambiguity.
Absolutely. Exactly.
To make that point. And Bill Duke,
yes.
that is Bill Duke who directed it. You know, that's his, I won't say his focus, but he did direct the award-winning documentary Dark Girls. And so addressing colorism is something that is important to him, that he has done in his work.
I was going to go back to Zora Neale Hurston specifically for that reason. And I think more of my interest in her was initiated by you. Yes, your writings about Zora and Langston Hughes. And
published in 2011,
right?
Not 2019, like someone else who has a plagiarism case in his history. That's all I'm going to
say. But yeah, so I think her
and I'm keeping that in the recording.
Awareness of, should I say, Blackness? Absolutely. But her awareness of color and what it represents, what it entails, you know, it's something that I explore with my students. You know, we usually do like a few short stories by Zora Neale Hurston, and it's just like, picking up any themes, guys?
Right, that's right, that's right.
But you know, and this idea, I do bring up the idea, were we better off, you know, segregated? I've heard a few people, you know, comment on that, you know, just casually, you know, and like we were almost more successful when we were segregated than we are now. And you know, it's worth some consideration. It's like, okay, so what was the dynamic? What were we able to do then that we're not doing now as an integrated folk? So, you know, I do think that, and we talk about microaggressions at work all the time. We are constantly having like professional development sessions around that. And, you know, everything is about, you know, equity and race and, you know, trauma. And, you know, we have all of these lovely themes and words and philosophies that we throw around now. And we're still missing, I think we're still missing the point. And approaching, even in junior high school, work like this, you know, The Boy Who Painted Christ Black. Let's look at the film. Let's read the short story. Let's analyze, you know, let's evaluate, let's interpret the information. And yeah, this is what children would be much more interested in school if you did that than other things.
And you're talking about
this is the
diversity and equity and all that. And I want to, I just have to add that, you know, there's a lot of anti-Black sentiment among people of color, but this idea of a Black Christ is not just a Black American concern, because Esquipulas is a reality from Central and Latin American countries. So the Afro-Latinidad is a truism. And as I had said years ago, an anchor from Telemundo network had come to my church to talk to us, because my church is Black and Hispanic, to talk about, this was way back in maybe 98, 2000, about the, you know, there were tensions brewing at that time over something, I don't know what. And I had to tell him, not I had to, because he was in agreement with us, but so I just reminded him or the audience that neither English nor Spanish are any of our native language, right? So Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, none of Spanish is not their native language. That is a colonized language. They speak some indigenous, language. None of us spoke. English is not our native language either, right? So we're fighting over languages that are not even ours. You need to speak English. How come you're speaking Spanish? I can speak Spanish, it's my language. Right. Again, it's this quest for Europeanism that is the enemy. We are not each other's enemy, right? So now this whole focus on this overemphasis on one incident that was recorded of a Black person violating an Asian person. It was in New York on the subway. Right.
Yeah.
Every other incident has been somebody else. But certain communities are using that to show,
of course,
in other words, don't sympathize with, it's anti-Black. It's we're not going to sympathize with you because look, you are racist against us. It's like, did you read the full article? Did you read what witnesses said prompted the altercation? Somebody called somebody a nigger. Okay.
Right. And that's why I had to get at you.
Right. And I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying everybody's willing to overlook that just to villainize the Black person. So, and there is some learning there on both sides. It's like, well, you can't not think of yourself as a minority because you're going to be, in the end, you're going to be treated not like you're white. So this quest for whiteness, right? But also, there is some learning about self-perception that we can learn. It's like, okay, you're not thinking of yourself as a minority. Well, number one, that's still a microaggression because what sort of psychological energy do you have to exercise to hold that off? But also, it's not a bad thing to develop psychological muscle to get rid of something. Actually, and to me, that brings us back to the story because that's just what the story was about. Changing your perception. You are not, you are the image of your savior. You are your savior. A white person is not your savior. You are your savior. And so, but when we can get down to those sorts of discussions.
As to say that to children.
Like all of this other stuff.
Who are you waiting on? Like which missionary? And when you talk about, stop it. I'm tired of that.
That's right.
Because that's how white teachers that teach in the hood are perceived. As missionaries. Like we can't save ourselves or educate ourselves. And I think that if, like in line with the short story and the film, being able to identify with something as powerful as the image of Christ is phenomenal. So the fact that it was even developed, bravo.
So that is why, my people, this story, The Boy Who Painted Christ Black, is so resonant. And if you teach that age group, I would say, young children, how young do you think would be able to grasp the story and the movie?
I would say definitely as young as 4th or 5th grade.
Okay.
Like
and through to through to look.
So that's because I was
through to film school, adult and film school need to read it.
No,
because that's why. So
I look at everything as divisions, right? What children are generally able to do, like developmentally, between specific ages or grades, and then what may be emotionally or socially appropriate. And then it's like, well, what background have they gotten? So if I have a K-8 school, like the one I'm in, if I know in K-2, there are certain non-negotiables,
Mm-hmm.
in social studies class or English class. There are basics that I'm going to teach them, of course, but through which context? That all day long, I get to choose that, you know. But I think as they move to like upper elementary, so the 3 to 5 division, where you can start to get them to be metacognitive and look at themselves. Not that they don't have
metacognitive. Sorry, I gotta write that down. Metacognitive.
Yeah.
I need a dictionary, but that's okay.
And because then they start to think about a little bit more who they are, and not just egotistically, but who they are in the midst of this reality. They start to look at themselves in the world, and it's just like, well. And then by the time they get to the middle school division, like 6 through 8, you want them to be able to say something about or synthesize or evaluative ideas about the world, themselves, their relation to the things, to the topics, how relevant those topics are. Are there other perspectives that you have to understand? But it's much easier to do that when you've had a certain foundation. And the foundation, I'm just talking about facts. So if I'm going to teach history, I have to teach history. I'm making the decision. And cater to what do they learn, so that by the time they get to the 3 to 5 division and the 6 to 8 division, how do I get them to consider these very perspectives that we're talking about right now as a more whole or rational or responsible citizen of the world? It's not about buying into one philosophy or another. It is about presenting all of the information and then letting them analyze and interpret and evaluate and synthesize their own ideas about it. But the children just don't. That's not something that's done. And that's what Black educators need to work on more. There's no excuse for it at this point. We know too much and we're capable of too much. But part of what we don't want to do is what Professor Duvall did. You don't necessarily want to give up, the home or the car or the salary or whatever, because now you're a little comfortable, and it's just like, well, I like this house, I like this neighborhood. So, I like going on vacation. But, and so as smart as we are, we should get together and think about how you don't have to give up everything to ensure that purpose is fulfilled and that you're impacting children appropriately. Because why can't one of the children I teach now, or one of the teachers that I supervise now, be John Henrik Clarke? I mean, like what's stopping them? That would be me, or our principal. You know what I mean? Our superintendent. All of the district is African American. All of the people in charge are African American.
Wow.
And it's almost like, the superintendent, the deputy superintendent, the entire superintendent's office.
Wow.
Pretty much every principal is a person of color, and like a huge percentage of them, I would say 90%, are African American, male and female.
We got to force through some stuff there.
And this is what I'm saying. Why would District 29 not be stellar?
Right.
As a superintendent, how do I create more of a legacy? And not for, the fame and fortune, like, see what I came in here and did. No, just to genuinely create a better future.
Right.
Don't you just want to do that just because? I don't understand.
Wow.
Because you're going to reap all the other benefits.
That's a great opportunity, unless there are some African Americans in those positions who side with the superintendent, right? Or side with Mrs. Duvall.
Right. Which is which is the issue. That is the issue.
And so to me, you're bringing it back to that that is the crux of this
Yes.
story and this film.
Yes.
In 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of everything you're articulating
Mm-hmm.
has been dramatized through this cast, through the way this story, unfolds.
Right. I think that was masterfully done too. The length of time. And it's just like, wow, this
in 30
really
minutes
encapsulated everything in 30 minutes. I loved it. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so since we are, educators, yes, I'm going to leave all links to things that we've been talking about in the description box so that you can read and discern and all that stuff. This story, if you had to advocate for it to be part of the core curriculum in your school, how would you articulate its importance to any one of those people in power that you mentioned who might be resistant?
I would require people that put me in this position or asked me to be in this position to trust what I bring to the table. Getting them to understand its value and its importance and its necessity. I don't think it would be that difficult. This conversation alone would be part of the conversation I would have with other people. The idea that this popular idea now that we have to have trauma-informed instruction because children have been out of school for so long and the pandemic has just created PTSD and every other thing that we need to be concerned with. That would be another angle that I could use to say, well, this is why this is necessary. The idea that it's about self-worth and self-confidence and self-esteem. Those are all necessary attributes, especially now. I think the last thing, being my father's child, I would just unapologetically do it. Like I really wouldn't need to ask permission. If we are paralleling this film and short story to the Brown versus Board of Education case, if we parallel our study of literature and the arts to our study of history, everything becomes relevant. And I won't have to fight that hard to get people to understand why this is necessary. But I think the beauty about having a certain degree of power is that I don't have to ask. I can just do it. Because I'm telling you, after I saw the questions and everything, I already started planning out like a whole thing. Like, oh yeah, this is the staff is gonna read it, they're gonna watch it, and how we're gonna do it, and not just throwing it or thrusting it upon you, because that doesn't stick. That doesn't work. My staff loves when I read aloud to them. So that's a short story that I would probably read aloud to them, and have them watch the film and then have a conversation. I think we need to converse about these things before we teach them.
I would emphasize that, number one, the content is not divisive, because there are many cultures that worship Black Christ. Yes. As I said, the Feast of Esquipulas, it originated in Guatemala, but it is celebrated in Panama, and throughout Central America and South America. So it actually brings cultures together.
Yes.
While at the same time, it is rectifying the anti-Black microaggressive culture that exists in higher ed, in instilling in a student, through his teacher and his principal, that his work matters, his perspective matters. And in college, if we are encouraging students to develop their voice and exercise their voice and come up with a point of view on things, to write critically and think critically, then, you know, this from short story to adaptation, this just opens that up.
Yes.
Fully. And just it's a great piece to use to examine.
Right.
How can you open something up in an adaptation, to add dimension, to add history? Because like I said, more of Dr. Clarke's teaching and experience comes through in the film, because it has been amplified in a way that it does not come across in the book, in the short story. And so on this Holy Saturday / Easter Sunday, what I would hope and what I would leave with everyone is, everyone has the right, as Dr. Clarke has said through Principal Duval in this story and in this film, every culture has the right to envision and interpret their spiritual experience the way they feel. That's every culture has done it. Europe has certainly monopolized that. And every culture has the right to do that and should do that.
Right.
Because anytime you look to someone else as your savior, for lack of a better word, you have failed yourself.
Right.
And you are certainly going to fail the generation that you are teaching.
Correct.
And so that is what I will leave with you. All right, so I'm going to stop this recording. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and look for this on Zoom tomorrow, Easter Sunday. If you observe Easter, have a lovely Easter, Passover. I know there's been a number of holy days that have happened. Holly was also about a week ago. So let's make it a practice to respect and acknowledge and not be threatened by other cultures, other races. As the film pointed out, the reunion, not only of African people of African descent across diaspora, but all people, because that is what some of our most successful Black organizers have done, brought people together of all races.
Yes.
To address the real enemy, which is white supremacy. So thanks, everybody.
Bye.